Hello, today's tutorial is dedicated to user Kieron Edwards the Kermit 3868 because a few weeks ago they messaged me asking if there was a way to donate to help the channel, and this is the first person who asked that since I made my Ko-fi account, so I told them about that. And they got me some coffee from there. And after doing so, they asked, can you maybe make a video on how to draw where our hand is going close to the camera from a 3D angle? So to show my gratitude for that extra step of support, I am going to be showing you all how to draw this. To draw something that you've never drawn before and you're not quite sure how to go about is you're going to want a reference image. Like once you've drawn something enough times and enough practice, you will kind of know how to draw it without one. But for this tutorial, I don't want to just be showing you how to draw a specific pose. I want to show you how to take a reference image and learn how to gather information from that to create your artwork, and you could do it with any reference image at all. So I went and found this reference image here. Now, of course, I'm not 100% sure what was in Kermit's mind when they asked me for the tutorial of the hand reaching out, because there's so many different ways that a hand could be reaching towards the screen, but I interpreted it as something kind of like this. And so I am going to show how to not just trace it, because we're trying to learn how to draw it for ourselves, but how to heavily reference this to make our own version. Now, typically I would use my head to kind of see the shapes and simplify them, but since you guys aren't in my head, hopefully, I am going to physically draw over this reference image to start so that you can kind of understand better what's going on in my head. Okay, so for a hand, typically I would draw the hand shape like this. There's the main part of the hand, and then the fingers, and then the thumb. And I'm not going to draw all the fingers, but that's basically what it would be. Or if you're using a 3D space, then you would draw it like this. See how that's more of a cube versus that's more flat? We are going to be using this kind of shape and highlighting it for the palm of the hand. So you'll notice that it's not a straight line, it's more of a curve. And I'm going to highlight this area as being kind of the front of the hand, and you can tell because of like where the shadows and highlights are. And then I will go down here and go like that to complete my shape. Next, we're going to want to pay attention to the fingers, and the fingers are made from cylinder shapes like this. And it makes it even easier because on the hand, you can see where each cylinder kind of ends and starts. And these are like the joint area. So you'll see it kind of has its own curve. And there's also the curve here. And same with over here. This one. And that one. And I'm just going to go over all of these spots with my cylinder shapes. Of course, you don't have to pay too much attention to each individual, like, smaller bump and, like, texture. We're just making it very simplified for right now. And then for the thumb, this person's got a pretty long thumb here. It's also going to be very similar, except the end here, you'll see how it's kind of rounded almost. So I will draw that, like kind of a rounded shape here. You see how that connects, and then I will go like this. Now a lot of the time the thumb is like a lot thicker than the fingers, or at least a little bit thicker. In this instance you can't really tell as much. But there we go. There is the basic shapes that we are going to want to follow when we do our own drawing. And you can use this method for however the hand happens to be positioned. You just try figuring out, how could I turn this into a simpler shape? Now if you take away the image, you can still see that it is very much a hand. Now we aren't just going to take away the image and then trace over this and then bam, there's our hand, because although that is a method for learning, we want to have created our own hand, even if we are trying to make it very similar to this one. So we are going to take these shapes and we are just going to try drawing them again, just from scratch over here. Remembering where there's curves, like this section here, and where there are straight lines. And now that I'm comparing, I'm seeing how this part, I made mine a bit too short and thick compared to the one on this side, so I'm going to try that again. I'm not going to cut out each mistake that I make because I want you guys to see that I'm not just doing things perfectly on the first try. I have to kind of redraw things a bunch of times as well, especially if I'm trying to replicate an already existing reference. Because once you kind of understand the way that the hand works, you will be able to kind of just design your own, and you won't need to follow a reference exactly. But first you kind of need to know how the hand works, and using the reference is an easy kind of way to do that. Something else I should mention is when you're picturing these, if you want, you could add another line here to make kind of the cylinder shape if you're trying to picture it. And you can also tell by how flat versus how curved it is, how much the finger is either going forwards or if it's going more above. So anyways, that was just a little bit of like extra information to help us. Okay, now that we have our base here, the main part of the hand, we are going to start on the fingers. So I am going to draw these shapes here, just like in the reference image, so that we know where the fingers are coming from. And now we are going to want to make the cylinder shapes. And for this, you want to really pay attention to the direction that each finger is going. Like this one is going out that way. This one is going more out this way. It's bending a little bit. Then there's this one, and then this one's going kind of downwards. And we want to keep that same direction going so that the hand's not gonna be going all over the place without us wanting it to. And remember that because the hand is going out, our fingers aren't going to be at the full length they would be if the hand was up. Because like see here, my hand that I drew quickly there, the fingers and the palm are around like the same height. But if the hand is facing more forward, like this, although it's still going to be like for the most part equal proportions, the fingers are going to look like they're squished down, but they're not. It's just facing forwards more. So now here is my first finger. And remember, I am darting my eyes back and forth to the reference image and kind of remembering the shapes that I drew before. sometimes if I don't draw it and I'm just visualizing, it's still good to go back and forth and I'm still imagining that the shapes are there. And we also want to make sure that these circles we drew here are approximately the same size because the fingers are around the same length. Now in this particular reference, this one finger is going on a kind of bit weird angle, like how it's bent a little bit, but because that's how it is, I am going to stick with that. But you're always welcome to change certain parts because of course we don't have to copy this image completely. And then I am going to go over to this finger. And then lastly go down to this one. And looking at these ones here, this finger I think might be a little bit small, so I am going to just make that a little bit longer. There we go. And now for the thumb, I'm going to start with that circle and then our cylinder shapes. And remembering how it's all connected. Now we aren't just stopping here because although we added the basic shapes, we don't want the hand to be as blocky as it looks right now. We still want it to look like a hand. So next I am going to fade this here and we can get rid of that part. Now we can just focus on the main image. Because all of these lines aren't actually going to be on the hand. Something that I want everyone to note is thinking about depth perception and what's closer is going to be larger than what's further away. And one of the ways that I like to kind of show how something is closer as opposed to far away is with the line art. I will do thicker lines for parts of the body that are going to be closer and then it kind of go thinner. And I'm also just going to make sure this can be a bit larger. And I'm going to alternate between having some straight lines and some curved lines depending on the reference and where I think the line is more straight versus more curved. So we have a bit more interest in the shapes, and we also don't want to end up with some sausage fingers if both sides are curved. Here, let me have my screen so that we can see both. There, I'm drawing some straight lines. And in the reference, you can see there's a lot of like smaller lines of different like textures, but because like we have the nail and everything going on. But I am just going to focus on more simpler, rounder shapes. And then lastly, this bottom one is almost curved slightly, so I'm going to really like lean into that to show that like extra bit of movement. Now, since we aren't drawing like extremely realistically, I'm not going to draw every single crease and line that the reference has. We're going to show just enough to give the viewer an idea of what's going on. So now we do want to kind of show where this part, like see here, we do want to hint at this part existing. And of course it's not a straight line like we drew. We aren't going to draw a straight line. We are going to draw just kind of some lines like this. As you'll see, this isn't quite a straight line, it kind of curves this way. And then here as well, it kind of curves like that. So I'm going to draw lines like these. And then there is a curve here. And I kind of want to have the thumb kind of going in this direction a little bit, so I'm going to add that. And I'm also going to kind of show this part as well, where the thumb is. And now we can get rid of that and then just clean up the lines a little bit. See how I tend to draw some like unfinished lines, so I will connect them. And of course this isn't like super cleaned up line art like I would if I were doing a drawing. It's just enough to kind of have all of the details and information that we can have. Alright, now looking at it like this, you might look at it and be like, this looks a little bit wonky. Because although it's in perspective, so without having any like shading to kind of hint more at that 3D space, like when it's flat like this, it may look a little bit awkward. So something that I'm going to do next to kind of to bring it all together is I am going to shade this just with cell shading, just very simple, and it will go a long way. Okay, now I'm gonna make another layer for coloring just so I don't accidentally mess up my main hand here. And I'm not coloring this hand in, like it's just gonna be plain white how it is right now. And I'm just adding another color, like kind of a grayish here. And now what we're going to do is we are going to shade the parts that are not facing us necessarily. So like for example here, I'm going to color in this, but leave this finger here. And with this one, I'm going to kind of shade in here, or maybe I actually might leave a little bit of space right there, then here, and then here. I'm going to shade like this, and then this part you can even see through the reference image. See how that part is lighter and then there's more shadow? I'm going to add the shadow here. And you might be a little bit confused, wondering like, how am I knowing where to add this shadow? And I will try to explain this a little bit once I have fully completed the shading, so you can really see kind of how it brings the piece out a lot more. And now look at that. Now you can really tell more that it is a hand reaching towards you. Like of course if you were doing a finished piece you might shade a bit differently, but what I did here was, again, going back to our basic shapes here. All the shapes that are kind of facing you, I just left it like highlighted, but then any of the parts that are kind of facing the side or the bottom have been shaded so that it really kind of brings together the fact that this is supposed to be a three-dimensional object. And there we go. And keep in mind, if you're drawing this as a whole person, you want to exaggerate it, make sure that the hand is larger than you would think it is going to be. Like, let's say I have a person here. Now, you might think, like, if someone just has their hand out, their hand is going to be maybe like this, right? Is it perfect? No. But that's just an idea. However, if the hand is going forwards, then you're going to want the hand to be a lot larger than you would think. And then you could show, you know, a bit of like the arm going that way. And now you can see that they're really putting their arm forwards as opposed to just beside them because of that space like that. Now, the way I drew this hand is definitely a bit more on the realistic side, and if you wanted to make it more simple, then you can still use those shapes. You would just draw it even simpler. Like you're keeping in mind the basic shapes. But you would just have a bit less detail to it, and just you would kind of have it like that. Except I did that really quick. But there you go. I hope that that helps a little bit in what you were looking for in this tutorial. And I look forward to making more videos for you guys in 2024. Have an amazing day. Bye.
Remember, don't hesitate to call on me for anything.